Adoption Registry.
Yes, ma'am. I was calling. I had a quick question. I was on the internet looking around, and there is just hundreds of websites of birth certificates and stuff in New York State that got falsified on these adoption cases. Is there any truth to all these hundreds of websites, or?
I don't actually know what websites you're talking about.
It's not a website. I mean, all you got to do is Google it, and there's like hundreds of websites where people have actually been told they were born like on March the 1st, 1970, and they turn out to be born in 1970, but given a whole different birth date. And
well, we don't change birth dates on our records.
Well, I know you. I know
that's true. Yeah.
I know you don't anymore. I know.
We never did.
Well, according to these hundreds of websites, you did, and it's been documented hundreds of times of this happening. And I was just calling to see what kind of answer you would have for that.
To be honest with you, I don't have any knowledge of the website saying that, but there's been a lot of misinformation recently coming out in all different articles about what the registry does and, what kind of information people can get. And, I mean, if you can identify some of the websites to us, you can send information in and ask if, anybody can verify any of this, or, maybe we can find out where it's coming from.
Well, what they're saying is they believe that the adopted parents, let's say the baby was born March the 1st, 1970, what they're basically saying, we're just using that specific date.
Right.
They're just saying that, let's say that the adopted father, the man that was about to adopt the child, his mother might have died or passed away on that day, and they reject the child due to that. And the social workers would say, well, we'll go find you another baby. Well, what happened was they didn't go find another baby. They charged the people like $15,000 more, changed the birth date, and give them the same baby. Basically, and I'm sure that was for attorney fees, and also they made a little.
I don't know how they got a birth certificate with a different date on it.
Well, I got a girl right now that I have never met. Just for instance, she was born in Rochester, New York. She got in touch with Rochester. She's an adoptee, and Rochester says there's no record of her to be found. Born in the state of Rochester. So they're having to send all of her information to Albany, to you all. So, there has been mistakes made, and Joanna out in Arizona at the adoption database, I'm sure you're very familiar with her. She has come across hundreds of cases where New York State's been wrong. And then when I call the registry and I speak to people there where you work, they tell me no, they've never made a mistake. But yet, there's documents.
I'm sure that at some point somebody may have made a mistake, but I'm saying, in general, that the birth certificate that is created comes from the hospital. They do a birth registration, and they send it in to the New York State Department of Health to have a birth certificate created. And when that comes in, that's considered a legal document. So the doctor signs a legal document saying that he delivered a child on this day in this hospital from this woman. And in order to change, they wouldn't change a child's birth date because we don't have, first of all, that just shouldn't be done, but no, we would have to have documentation from someone in order to do that. Now, if these people are going through, like a private adoption, but not a legal adoption, then I'm not sure how they're creating a birth record for a child.
They're correct. That's what I think's happened. These private adoptions, I believe you're.
I mean, if there's no record of these, it could be that there's no record of these adoptions because they never took place legally through the courts.
Correct. That's where I think New York.
But I don't know how they can get a birth certificate with the information they want on it because the hospital has to register the birth with the state.
Yep.
And when they do that, it's considered a legal document, and it happens when the child is born. And I know there's a lot of misinformation out there because a lot of people are under the impression that when you're adopted, your birth date changes to the day you were adopted to that family, but that's not the case.
Right.
And if they can't find a record of a child's birth, then that child may not have been born in Rochester. That child may have been born somewhere, maybe in another state.
Yes.
I mean, we don't really know.
Well, one thing I thought of with this particular individual is there's 2 St. Joseph's hospitals, Rochester and one in Syracuse. And there might be others in the state of New York as well. Well, this woman was born in she was always told Rochester, St. Joseph's in Rochester. But just down the road, there's St. Joseph's in Syracuse as well.
Right.
And I'm thinking, well, you know, it could be possible that the worker, the social worker, looked at the papers, seen St. Joseph's Hospital, and said, "Oh, Rochester," or "Oh, Syracuse."
Yeah, but it has to go through when it goes through vital records. Those are 2 different counties.
Exactly.
And we have the county now. Rochester is in one county, and Syracuse is Onondaga County. I think Rochester's like Monroe County.
Well, now, why would she not be in that? Why would she not? Her information not be in Rochester?
She may not have been born there.
Exactly. Well, anyway, there has been, documents, there's been things happen where people, the information has gotten messed up. And sometimes it's not even in adoption cases. Sometimes it's people that was actually born. They go file their Social Security just to find out they've been celebrating the wrong birthday all these years. I mean, it happens, Accidents happen, whether it be adoptions or not adoptions. But there's been hundreds of cases where birth dates and stuff of that matter have gotten mixed up in the state of New York, and I've got proof of that. But now, having that be said, I believe it goes back to what you said. It could be that it was a private adoption. That.
Well, private adoptions still have to go through the courts. I mean, they can't just create a birth certificate with a new name on it because nobody has that. They don't have the paper. They don't have the capability of giving you an official document from New York State with misinformation on it, knowingly. I mean, I'm sure, at some point in every aspect, there are mistakes that are made, but those are, very few compared to what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know where this information is coming from. I mean, lately, just recently, we've been getting people sending us the copies of articles that talk about the registry, and they've never even contacted New York State to get the information correct, and they're putting out there a lot of misinformation. We just got a recent article from People magazine that said the New York State Adoption Registry doesn't have the information for people born before 1984, and that if you're born after 1984, you can get all kinds of information.
Oh, well, I know. No, that's not true.
Well, that's not true because it doesn't make a difference what year you were born in. Whatever information is in your sealed record that's non-identifying unless someone comes forward is given to you.
Right.
And it doesn't make a difference what year you were born in. And then, there's people out there trying to get the laws changed, and there's a lot of legislation going on, trying to get records opened. And I talked to a gentleman who was quite involved with this whole thing, and in our local papers, there was a big article, and it didn't give correct information about what the registry does. This man was led to believe that we're volunteers that come in and do this part-time and don't really care who we match together.
Oh, yeah, that's not right.
When I explained to him that we are state employees, this is our job, and we take our jobs very seriously, and told him what the process is, he was going to go back and explain to them. And I said, well, first of all, they shouldn't be putting this information out there unless they talk to someone. And people just tend to believe whatever they read. And I'm sure there's, it happens in every state.
Right. Exactly. It does. It does.
State's been beaten on quite a bit lately.
Yeah, but I haven't been reading on New York State or you. These are actually documented cases where New York State has been wrong. I mean, I got people that can come forth and say, yeah, you were wrong, and these are my family, and we took a DNA test.
What kind of information do you have personally that shows that there's an issue with
It was just birth dates getting mixed up. There's several people that I've met down my road where their birth date, was just mixed up.
Well, is there any documentation to this?
Well, actually, Albany,
like the director or to the New York State Department of Health?
No, I don't know what they did about it, but all I know is it went back to that social worker in 1970. I really believe that back in those days it was easier done than it is today. I mean, I really believe that, and you know, because today we can't get away with anything. Where back then they didn't have computers, they didn't have, you know. I mean,
yeah,
you
but
could.
They still had to have a legal. I mean, if somebody's saying they have a birth certificate with the wrong information on it, where did they get it? And is it really a New York State birth certificate?
Well, that's true.
Fake anything.
Yeah, that's very true. But these birth dates have been wrong in New York. But now, you know, the thing about
How many are we talking about now? I mean,
70s. I only work on like 70 cases. You know, older cases. I don't really work on.
And who are you? You know, can I ask who you are and what you do? I mean,
well, I'm West. That's fine. Yeah, my name's Weston Witt. I just help families reunite with their biological families. Whether it's a birth.
You're like I'm trying to
like an investigator type.
Like an investigator for adoption.
Yeah, I got involved over my wife being adopted in the state of New York, and I'll have to say everything that the state of New York sent on my wife was correct. And but now, you know, I do know for a fact that New York has been wrong in the past. Now, I'm not saying New York. I'm saying the social worker and whatever went on back in the 70s made it legal somehow before it got to Albany. That's what I'm trying to tell you. And I don't know how they did it, but I do know of a few people that did get done that way back in those days. I haven't met not one single person who is younger, you know, in their 20s that this has happened to. But now back in the 70s, I've ran into it quite a bit, and it just sort of blows my mind. But other than that, it's not really Albany's fault, because I mean, it's nobody's fault except for, you know, whoever that social worker was back in the day. I mean, I just think, you know, you could easily, you know, how many children were adopted out, I mean, every day and still being adopted. I mean, you could look down and glance and see like St. Joseph's Hospital and just make an honest mistake. But then you're right about the county. But, you know, it's just, I don't know, it's something about 1970. It's almost as if it was easy to do. If the parent didn't want the baby born on a certain date, they could.
I still don't know how they can.
Yeah, I don't either. I don't either. I agree with you.
Do these people have birth certificates that show that?
They do. They do.
Do they have proof that they weren't born on that day?
Yes, they do.
Where'd they get the proof that they weren't born on the day of their birth?
DNA. They did a DNA.
Well, how can DNA tell you what your date of birth is?
Well, it can't tell you the date of birth, but they called Albany and asked, you know, if it had been a match or anything like that, and they're like, no, we don't see anything. And then Albany would send them the wrong information. And I believe the reason why Albany, talking about your registry.
Well, are you talking about the registry?
Yeah, they would send the registry would send the wrong information, like non-ID information, and the reason why is because it was wrong from the beginning. It ain't that you guys were wrong. It's just that
in a file when we do a file for an adoptee or, you know, sibling or biological parent, we get the sealed record, which has the original birth certificate and all the court documentation.
Right.
And if every record has that date on it, and those birth certificates are originals, then we have to say that that's the date.
You have to.
Many mistakes.
Yeah, you have to say that. Whatever you get, you have to say is where I'm coming from. I mean, you have no control over what that birth certificate says.
Yeah, but we know if it was not a legal birth certificate. I mean, people don't have access to the forms to do this.
Well, they don't nowadays. They don't.
I mean, they never. I mean, this is the paper they use is specially designed so that they can't be recreated by somebody else. And it's always been that they've had, you know, as safe as it could be.
Right.
But for you to say that there's that many out there that are wrong, I can't imagine how that can happen. But if you have documentation, you need to send that into, you know, the director of vital records.
Well, they've found their families though. They don't care to even think about it.
Yeah, but that's if they're saying there's an issue like that out there, and people, have to come up with documentation, or nobody's going to take them seriously.
Well, that's true.
Okay?
That's true.
That's the thing. If you don't have, they can call, they can post whatever they want on the web. I mean, doesn't have to be the truth, but people read this stuff and they believe it. And no matter what website you go to, I mean, anybody can say anything. And we've seen it just recently right in print, and nobody's ever contacted this office or the director to ask what the true facts are on how they determine this.
Well, do you think they'll ever...
I mean, there's been a lot of information out there saying that, the success rate of matching people is very low, but what they did is the figures they used were not correct. Mm-hmm. What they did was take all of the registrations that come in as opposed to how many are matched, but they didn't tell you that out of, we can get 200 registration forms in a month, okay? We go month to month, and out of those 200, there could be 50 or 60 of those that have to be rejected because either the child was not born or not adopted in New York State, and they have to meet both criteria. Mm-hmm. Or they're people trying to register register with different registration form, but they're not actually a sibling. It could be a grandparent, adoptive parents. There's other people in the family that try to register thinking that anyone in your biological family can register for information or try to reunite, but we have to reject them. They didn't take that out of the equation.
Well,
so
like
it looks
this,
like we don't have a great success rate, but we make matches every day.
Yeah.
And we have we haven't had any issues where we mismatched anyone. There's a lot of people that go through this paperwork before it goes out the door.
Yeah, well, like this lady, though, I'm working with, I mean, and, she, ever since she was a child, it was Rochester, New York, the whole 9 yards, and she calls Rochester to get
it's always Rochester, is that?
Yeah, she was born in Rochester. Her birth certificate states she was born in Rochester. Mm-hmm. St. Joseph's Hospital. Her adopted mother, I talk to her quite often. She has the original birth certificate, it has her adopted parents' names on it, of course. And it does say Rochester and St. Joseph's Hospital and all that. Well, she calls Rochester to get another copy, and Rochester says, you're nowhere in our system. We don't...
She's asking for the birth certificate under the correct name. She can't ask for the birth certificate under a biological name if a child was adopted.
Okay.
And if she's asking, if you try to order a birth certificate, the questions they're going to ask you is, first of all, who you are to the person you're ordering the birth certificate for. They're going to ask you your name. They're going to ask your date of birth. Mm-hmm. They're going to ask for your parents' names and where you were born. And if you give them your biological information and you were adopted, there is not going to be a record because those records are sealed. And the only birth certificate, every birth certificate has a specific number. And that number, that particular record will be sealed. So if you tried to order it under your biological name, of course they're going to tell you there's no record of that because no one has access to that. So
you're saying she was adopted in Rochester's why her birth certificate reads that?
No, if she was born in New York State, what happens is that the Court of Adoption sends the adoption notification to the state, to our amendment correction unit, and they get the birth certificate. They make the correction and amendments to it. They change. The only thing that changes on the birth certificate are the names, and that's the child and the parent.
Right.
Everything else is the same, but they would never be able to order a birth certificate under their biological name.
Correct.
And because what happens is the court has to send everything here, and everything gets done here. Some of the local levels don't have the correct copies, so a lot of times the local level will call and say, do you have a birth certificate for this person? And there's a lot of times they don't have the amended copy, but they know the child was adopted.
Yeah, but
looking for a birth certificate.
She's not trying to order it under her biological name. She's trying to order it under her adopted name, and they're claiming.
And they're telling her there's no record. That means that the court, what they need to do in a case like that is you go back to the Court of Adoption and you tell them that your birth certificate was never changed, and they can send us a certificate of adoption showing the date of adoption, and the record can be corrected.
Right.
But if the court doesn't forward the paperwork, it's either that it wasn't done legally, and that's why they can't find a birth certificate, or the court never forwarded the correct documentation, which, I mean, normally the courts, there's a process they go through, and a new birth certificate is issued from Albany for wherever that child was born.
Mm-hmm.
No matter where they're adopted. If you're adopted in another state, you can still have a New York State birth certificate.
Yeah.
But you were adopted in a different state, or you can have an Ohio birth certificate that you were born in New York.
Mm-hmm. But
so
yeah, I
there's
mean,
a lot
it's
of different things that can happen. If this person was born in New York and adopted in another state, then New York may not have a record of it.
Exactly,
the
but
other courts don't. Yeah, they changed the birth certificate in the state that they were in, and they never forwarded information to New York to change it.
She was
so
born
there's a lot
in.
of reasons for this.
Yeah, she was born. She was born in New York State, in Rochester, and
right.
her birth certificate says it. And she just wanted to call and order an extra copy under her adopted name, not her biological name. And they say, "No, ma'am, you're not nowhere in our system."
But she has a copy of the birth certificate
yes.
she's trying to order?
Yes, yes. Her name's Nicole. She lives down in Clearwater, Florida now. And she's 42 years old. And she's a real nice lady. And she was just in total shock when she found it out, because she always thought she was born in Rochester. And
yeah, but if you call it New York State and you just give your name and your date of birth and your parents, you know, your legal name and your legal parents, even if she wasn't clear on exactly what city she was born in, as long as it wasn't in one of the 5 boroughs, upstate New York should have a record of her birth.
Exactly, and New York State.
But if she called and gave them that information, they didn't have it. It wasn't because she wasn't born in Rochester. But if she has a birth certificate and she has it in front of her and she's trying to order a copy and she gives them that birth certificate number, they should be able to locate her birth certificate.
Okay, okay.
So she needs to call somebody in the certification unit with the Department of Health, and she needs to ask them, tell them she wants to order her birth certificate, and give them the number of that birth certificate.
Okay, okay.
We can look it up and find out what is her name.
I can't remember her last name. I was just told.
We need her legal name and her parents' names, and we have a search system. And I mean, if you can get that information between myself and my supervisor, we could look that up and find out if there's a birth certificate with that number.
Okay, I'll get.
Tell her what that birth certificate should say.
Yeah, exactly. Just get the one that she has and get the number.
If she has a copy of that, the best suggestion is to make a copy of what she has.
And send it in?
Send it into this office.
Okay.
And ask us to look at it and maybe bring it over to the certification unit and see. But we have access to different systems that we can look up her birth certificate. If we see it, we can figure out, why there's some confusion. We may be able to see something on that birth certificate that would tell us why she's having an issue with it. There might be something that, we see because we work here and we work with these papers every day. We could find out.
Yeah.
So you could give her our address and ask her to send it and reference that. You talked to us and that we asked you to send in a copy.
Okay,
and I
I'll
can give you
tell
the
her.
address to send it to.
Yeah, because I told her, I said, with my wife was adopted, and I told her, I said, she can call Rome, New York, where she was born at City Hall, and they'll send it right on to you, right on to my wife.
Yeah, well, sometimes the local level doesn't get the amendment. It doesn't get changed with them, or somehow the copies don't get to them and the information. And if they don't have the correct information, they usually refer people to the certification unit here, or otherwise, if it was an adoption or any changes were made to a birth certificate, they would send them over to the amendment correction unit, and they could find it.
Okay.
But we'd have to actually see it in order to know what. We have to have it in front of us in order to see what the problem is.
I'll get that to Roland and get her to send that in to you, a copy of it at least, and see if we can't find out where she was.
Ask her to send us a copy of that.
Because she could have been born anywhere in New York at this point, really. I mean, if she's not in Rochester.
We can tell by the numbers on them where, there's a lot of different information on there. We can tell where it came out of, what city, what county. We can tell if it came out of New York City in one of the 5 boroughs. I mean, there's always different things, because maybe she was born downstate.
Yeah,
we don't hold the records for New York City.
Right.
So but once we see a birth certificate, we see the number, we see the information. That's the best way for us to determine what may have happened or how to get her what she needs. Okay.
Well, we've tried. We'll try this and give it a try, and I appreciate your time, really do. Thank you for talking to me.
Okay.
Bye-bye.